Welcome in, Hokies fans, to this edition of the Tech Sideline podcast. We record on Tuesday, October 25th, as we get you ready for Thursday night football in Raleigh. Virginia Tech set to take on the 24th ranked Wolfpack in just 2 short days. On today's episode, we'll talk keys to the game, key players, and discuss what the Hokies need to do to get back in the win column. All that and more coming up on episode 266 of the Tech Sideline podcast, which starts right now. We welcome you in whether you are listening or watching on YouTube. If you are on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe while you're there, and also turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any future podcast. This edition of the Tech Sideline podcast is sponsored by First Bank and Trust Company. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference in your overall experience. First Bank and Trust Company is the bank that puts you first. Visit www.firstbank.com to learn more. Let's go ahead and introduce the crew for today. On set, we have Will Stewart, founder and general manager of TechSideline.com. Across the way, to my right, lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. In the fourth chair for the last time is Jake Lyman. He'll be back in the host chair on Monday, but hard to believe that his last podcast is right around the corner. Behind the scenes producing is Jack Brizendine, as well with Nick Brown. And I'm your host for today, Katie Adams. Before we get into this slate talking about NC State, I know you had some stuff that you wanted to talk about, Will.
So first of all, Jake, you're hosting on Monday?
Yeah, I will still be in town if you would like me to host on Monday.
And I will be in Florida, so that's
going to
need to happen.
Then we call an audible.
Oh, and the second thing is I keep forgetting to tell you, that Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, not sponsored.
All right, we'll
so
we'll switch
right
that in the
now
ad read right now.
But the thing I really want to talk about is we have started a new show called TSL Today. It's a completely student-run show because they wanted to do it, and I said, I don't have the time. You guys do it. Just all kidding aside. We're currently doing it 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. At this point, it's only been a video production here in the studio. So the format of TSL Today is that it's 3 segments. First segment is the news of the day. Second segment is a guest, and the third segment varies. They've been doing trivia and things like that. Third segment is typically fun stuff. So this show, in its entirety, first of all, it doesn't go live like this does. It's pre-recorded. And in its entirety, it goes typically about 30 minutes, with each segment being 10 minutes long. So far what we are doing is putting that on YouTube as 3 separate videos, because that makes them shorter, easier to digest. One of the issues we have on YouTube is that everything we put on YouTube is an hour long. So we're going with some shorter content, and this is a way to do it. And in particular, getting out news that people may not have heard or read because they just haven't had the time, they can check it out. So far it's been like 3 10-minute video segments. We are going to soon start taking the entire half hour and putting that on our audio feed on all the various platforms. So if you are a person who, first of all, if you're a person who watches the Tech Sideline podcast video, then that's what all that other stuff that's appearing on our YouTube feed is. But if you listen to the Tech Sideline podcast, you're going to notice some other stuff showing up there soon. Again, it'll be called TSL Today. It'll be shorter. Don't get that confused with the regular TSL podcast. We'll still number our long form podcast. And we'll call it the Tech Sideline podcast. And then this other show will be called TSL Today. And again, you'll see it'll be about half an hour on your audio feed. And kind of how we envision that is that's a drive time thing you listen to on your way home. So
depending on how long your commute is. If you live in Northern Virginia, you could probably fit in an entire TSL podcast.
You're listening to the whole podcast already, right? For me, my drive home is like 17 minutes. So at the very least, I'd get the news of the day. So look for that. We're pretty excited about it. We're trying to do more and more. And so Giovanni Heater, first of all, Jake helped out with the planning of this. And we were getting ready to launch this project with Jake. And then he's like, I got a job. Sorry. So he has handed it off to Gio, and Gio is doing the hosting, and he's doing a fantastic job. And I bring up Gio because we've had him on here a couple of times, but after Jake sachets on down to Nashville, and once we get out of football season, I think you'll be seeing Gio more as host of the podcast.
Yep.
So Sorry to go on and on, but something to look for and appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Very exciting. I've watched the first 2 episodes of TSL today, and they've been great. So highly recommend everyone checking those out. Well, looking at the schedule at the beginning of the year, this is the game that I was probably the most excited about outside of West Virginia, just because of a lot of factors. Thursday night football in Raleigh on the road. Carter Finley is a great atmosphere historically. NC State had a preseason top 15 team. They had ACC preseason player of the year in Devin Leary. So many things kind of coming together. And you look at it now, it's still going to be great, but when you take a step back and look at NC State's season, it's kind of been overshadowed by the fact that they haven't necessarily lived up to that preseason hype.
They haven't, and even when Devin Leary was healthy, their offense still wasn't quite where it was.
Wasn't quite right.
Yeah, so somebody put the stats on our board this morning, and basically they averaged 6.1 yards per play last year, and that was down to 5 yards per play this year. As a comparison, Virginia Tech in 2021, an offense that most of our fans hated, we averaged 5.5 yards per play.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, their offense was not living up to the hype this year. And
so what is Tech averaging this year?
I don't even want to know. Don't want to know.
Sorry to interrupt.
But anyway, now they don't have Devin Leary anymore. So they've gotten worse. And, we put up 9 points against Syracuse. Quarterback is basically a transfer from an FCS school and is an FCS level player, quite frankly, in my opinion. So they are going to they're sort of like an old school Virginia Tech team now. Their defense is very, very strong. To win games, they've got to not turn it over.
Yeah, not Bud Foster's best level strong, but really good defense.
But very good, yeah.
We were used to, but there was a time in the mid 2000s there were Bud's defenses in terms of the crude metric of total defense were number 4, number 1, and number 4. I think that was 04 through 07.
Yeah.
When Hall and Adibi were playing linebacker. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit here. I was thinking to myself, how do I think about this game? And in my prediction part, I got to thinking about when Tech went up to Boston College in 1998 and they had Nick Sorensen at quarterback. And Tech went up there and won 17-0 because their defense was so good.
They had 6 turnovers and won 17-0. Virginia Tech turned the ball over 6 times and won 17-0.
Fumbled it 7 times
and
and lost 4.
They even gave up like 160 yards rushing to like that Mike Cloud guy.
Oh, that's
their
right.
running back. So
yeah.
they got torched on the ground and turned it over 16 times and still somehow won 17-0.
Now, this is part of the show where Katie says, "Yeah, I wasn't born yet."
Right.
I was not born. Well, all season it's kind of been like a waiting game of when NC State was going to break through and play up to their potential. Now, of course, we'll talk about the quarterback situation later, but it gets even more dicey there. Even week 1, they won a 1-point game at East Carolina, which they pretty much handed to them on a platter. Their kicker missed an extra point and a field goal at the end, and they were going to win that
ECU's
game.
kicker did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were, so close to losing week 1. Also, you think about their game at Clemson, which wasn't bad. I mean, to lose by 10 points in Death Valley is not something to hang your hat on.
I thought they played very well for about 3 quarters, but in the end, their offense just couldn't get anything accomplished. I thought their defense played fine, but their offense just could not get anything
Now,
going.
was this while Leary was still playing for him?
It was still, yeah. In fact, they took the lead early in the 3rd quarter. I think they drove for the first drive of the second half and took the lead.
Yeah.
But it was all Clemson after that. But NC State's defense held up well, as they have all year. And, when they lost to Syracuse, I guess 9-10 days ago now, their defense held up fine. They just couldn't score.
Now, NC State is ranked 24th, and whether they deserve to be ranked is a different situation. But Scott Glessner pointed out last week that this is likely the only ranked matchup for Tech all season. The last time Tech only played one ranked team was 1986. But you look at the rest of the schedule, there's a possibility that maybe Liberty is ranked going into that game, which would be something.
Thank you for the reminder. So 1986.
That was my senior year.
Well, that was the bowl game.
Do you remember, I guess, what ranked team we played?
Well, they played NC State in a bowl game. Is that included, or are we talking regular season?
I don't know. That's what he said in the chat.
I'm going to guess Clemson.
If Jake, you want to look up and confirm that, if possible, we'll get to
it.
It
might have been
when we
that Temple
toss to you.
Temple was good that
Remember,
year.
remember Tech lost to Temple, but then Temple had to forfeit the game.
forfeit it back.
Bruce Arians was their head coach.
Yes,
for had an ineligible player.
Paul Palmer, who was very good, was ineligible.
Right.
Yeah. It's possible. I think they played. I don't think they played West
I
Virginia.
think Jake has the answer.
It was number 18 NC State in a bowl game.
Okay.
Wow.
So all right. So the last time Virginia Tech only played one ranked team in a season, it it was NC State, and Tech ended up winning 10 games that year. This year they're playing one ranked team in the whole
And it's
season,
NC State.
and we're not going to win 10 games.
We have
this year.
demolished our chances of winning 10 games at this point. I think that's safe to say.
Yeah.
I will say I went to that bowl game, and that was an outstanding football game. But we're not here to reminisce. We're here to preview.
Right. With 4 ACC schools in North Carolina, we obviously see UNC and Duke every year, but we don't see a lot of NC State or Wake Forest. Haven't played at NC State since 2010. A big win that night. Do y'all remember it?
I do. I remember where I watched it. I remember my feelings throughout the course of the game. Mm-hmm. It was a 3:30 kick, I believe, and Tech dropped down 17-0. Quickly, and you're like, oh my god,
and looked like crap doing it.
Yeah, looked terrible doing it, and then they ended up winning the game easily.
Yeah,
Russell Wilson threw 3 picks that game. I remember Darren Evans had a long touchdown run.
Yep.
I want to say we hit Boykin maybe on a deep pass, maybe close to halftime.
I think Tech opened the second half with a kickoff return for a touchdown by David Wilson.
I believe that's right.
Yeah. I just remember sheer panic at the way it was going in the first half. And then I remember a buddy of mine calling me up and just during halftime and just railing on the team. And then they came back and won in the second half.
Yep.
And Tyrod Taylor versus Russell Wilson. Very cool.
2 quarterbacks that are still playing in the NFL, which is wild. Like I think that was Russell Wilson's last year at NC State. So then soon after he said I'm out, went on to Wisconsin, and then he's had a pretty good career since then.
That was an odd decision.
No, he wanted to play baseball.
Did he?
Too. Because remember, he's played minor league baseball.
Yeah.
He's been in the Yankees farm system, right? Yeah.
Do you remember that Michael Vick got drafted? Colorado Rockies drafted him?
30th round. That was back when the Major League draft was 50 rounds, I believe.
Yeah.
So not a lot of history with NC State, especially in Carter Finley. I noticed that we do play NC State next year at home again, so that'll be exciting, as well as Wake Forest. We'll trade the 2 blue schools for Wake and NC State.
Yeah, I was writing in a recent article about, and we talked about this on the podcast when the ACC scheduling model was announced, how like literally every rivalry you can think of is preserved except for Tech Miami. Mm-hmm. And I wrote, that stinks and we know what we're losing, but we don't know yet what we're gaining. You're going to gain more games with NC State, whom I want to play more games with Clemson, more games with Wake, which are easy to go to.
They're fun road trips.
Yeah.
I've got my routine down now whenever I go to Wake Forest. I know exactly what I do almost every time. So.
There's you can park like right next to the stadium almost for free, right?
I ended up parking at like this golf bar. I forget how far away it is from the stadium, and pregame in there. And walk into the stadium. It's a good time.
I remember in 2006, I think it was, I called up and got a hotel room like 2 blocks away, like a day or 2 before the game.
Well, were you with us? Yeah, you were tailgating with us. We all stayed at that hotel the night before the game and then tailgated in the hotel parking lot all day on Saturday because that was a night game. That was a fun time.
Yeah.
As someone who loves barbecue, I'll take any chance I get to go to a game in North Carolina. Camel City Barbecue in Winston-Salem is like the best ever. So I don't know when the next time we play at Wake is, but
Camel
that's like
City?
my spot. Yes.
Okay.
I went there before the COVID game.
It's a weird name. Like, is the barbecue made out of camels or?
No, maybe. I don't know. I have no idea, honestly.
Sorry to stop the show with that hilarious.
No, I brought up a tangent. But we can go ahead and get into this year's matchup, starting with the NC State offense. It looks a little different than we thought it would. Like we said, preseason ACC Player of the Year and NC State quarterback Devin Leary is out for the remainder of the season after a torn pectoral muscle against FSU. Had surgery last week, but really unfortunate for them given what their ceiling could have been this year.
Yeah, I know. And I don't have really any explanations for their struggles earlier in their season because I don't know their personnel quite as well. But even with their loss to Clemson, you've got to think that with Leary, they're going to be in every game this year, and probably at worst go like 9-3 or something like that, and have a really good season where they finish in the top 25. But you look at that, number 24 ranking next to their name, and without Leary, and if you've watched their quarterback play. Jack Chambers, he's 5'10", 190 pounds. 4 years as a starter at Charleston Southern, but didn't complete a high percentage of his passes. Had a pretty high interception rate. So he seems like an FCS level player to me. So they're not going to be the 24th best team in the country with him at quarterback. So they're a team that looks like they're probably going to go around 7-5 to me. I haven't looked at their remaining schedule, but I think that's the difference between having Devin Leary and not having Devin Leary. So it sucks for them, and I feel bad for them because I think Dave Doran's done a great job there. But it is what it is, man. If you've got a really good quarterback and you lose him, it could affect a lot of things.
I'm sitting here trying to pull their schedule up. My phone's not cooperating. Right. So,
well, I know, unfortunately for them, they still have to play Wake Forest and UNC.
That's right.
So
they do.
Oh, yeah.
Those are two ranked matchups that they
correct.
probably won't be favored in.
See, that's what I wanted to look up. You can be ranked 23rd or 24th and not really be that good, but still win your games if your schedule's friendly. But that doesn't sound
theirs
friendly.
is not.
I want to say they still play BC and maybe Louisville, so there's opportunities for wins, absolutely. But
like if I'm an NC State fan, I'm sitting there thinking, Louisville's actually playing decent ball right now, unlike early in the season. So can we beat them with our backup quarterback? And I'm of course throwing out games against North Carolina and Wake, which I don't think they can win without Devin Leary. So to me, if I'm an NC State fan, I'm saying, okay, we got to beat Virginia Tech, and we've got to beat. Who was the other one? Well, Boston College.
Boston College.
Right. Beat those two teams, and then we're 7-5, and maybe you beat Louisville, maybe you don't. So I would set their over/under for wins right now at 7.5, just based on losing their quarterback.
And hopefully they'll get to go to a bowl game this year that doesn't get canceled 3 hours before. Like we talked about it in a couple podcasts ago. Their misfortune.
Who were they supposed to play?
UCLA.
Right.
Jeez.
In San Diego.
Which UCLA, I guess, their fan base isn't strong. I know there was a bunch of state fans that traveled to California for this game and then spent so much money. That's just awful.
Yeah, well, at least they got to do it in San Diego. It's a great city.
Yeah, I would. If Tech was going to play a bowl game in San Diego,
and the bowl game got canceled, I'd be like, oh well, I'm in San Diego.
80% of why I'm here is still happening. You know? I mean, that'd be very cool.
Okay, yeah.
So you mentioned it, Chris. In Leary's absence, they've looked to Jack Chambers to fill his role, a grad transfer from Charleston Southern, and he's been okay. He, was a decently mobile against Syracuse, but mainly what I saw from that game in Syracuse is that they don't trust him to throw the deep ball at all.
Nah. I mean, like I said, 5'10", 190 pounds, completed, I believe, 57% of his passes at Charleston Southern. He was a 4-year starter there. 40 touchdowns, 29 interceptions, not a very good rate. No. Good runner, which always, seems to give Virginia Tech trouble. But this year it hasn't been mobile quarterback. Tech really hasn't faced a mobile quarterback per se yet. But Tech's gotten lit up by some very good passing quarterbacks. So for this week, I will take that trade. I will take playing the mobile quarterback over the guy that struggles in the passing game, especially when you consider right now 3/4 of Tech's two deep at cornerback is made up of 2 true freshmen and a redshirt freshman. Yeah. So I'll take that matchup this week, and then maybe Dorian Strong can come back for the next week's game, because I think Tech will have a good cornerback combination when Strong comes back. But for this week, give me the guy who can't pass. If he can run, that's fine.
So what's the timing on everything? Of what I'm trying to figure out is NC State has had a bye week to build their game plan around Chambers.
Yep.
The previous game, were they able to do that?
They've come out and said that they feel like he was hurt in the Florida State game. But first the X-rays were negative, but then it turns out that that he was injured. So I think they had some time. Now they didn't have like an extra week,
right?
Of course, or an extra 5 days in this case. The extra time will help them. But we do have there is a game to watch. He did start against Syracuse. Yeah. It's just I don't think there's much talent there. I think they'll get the most out of him that they can, but I don't think there's much to get.
Yeah. Okay.
They didn't announce publicly that Leary was out for the season until Saturday, right before they played Syracuse. But I know that Dave Doran said in a press conference, he knew that whole week that Devin was probably going to need surgery. And I think it's going to be interesting moving forward to see if he even stays at NC State after this year, whether he elects to try the NFL or whether he transfers somewhere else or stays at NC State. But
I would hate it if he transferred somewhere else, because he's spent his whole career there and he's been developed there by their coaches. So hopefully, I hope he elects to play his last season there.
Well, you need more good players to stay in the conference. I know you're working on an article where you've looked at former Duke receiver Mike Bobo, former Pitt receiver Jordan Addison, right?
Yeah, Jake Bobo. Mike Bobo's son. All right, anyway. Yeah, so he was Duke's best player last year. Transfers to UCLA, and he ranks 3rd amongst all transfer wide receivers this year. So Duke lost their best player from a bad team and actually have still managed to get a lot better. So
and Addison is having a good year at USC.
Right, exactly. And if Bobo had stayed at Duke, the 3 games they lost were very, very close games. Like they're at least 1 game better if he had stayed at Duke, but instead he's playing at UCLA.
So I mentioned the possibility of Devin Leary transferring because, Chambers has been the guy so far. They're showing respect to him, playing him. He's been in the 2 deep for this entire year, so it makes sense that he would be the starter. But I want to throw out another name, and I guess now their second string is MJ Morris. He's a true freshman from working in recruiting. I remember him very well. He was a guy who was super talented coming out of high school. Had 30-plus offers, Alabama, Clemson, Penn State, Michigan, you name it. And he's played a little bit. I think he's played in 2 games so far. I would expect that they probably do burn his red shirt at this point, given that NC State has a decent amount of games left. And he's more of a threat in the passing game. So, honestly, I just want to throw that out there because I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of MJ Morris on Thursday night.
You're not wrong. I mean, if you consider Chambers as a guy who's got a limited ceiling, I mean, this is his last year anyway. He was an FCS player for 4 years until transferring this year, and you've got a guy who had major offers behind him. Then you could potentially decide to go that route. Especially if you're worried you might lose Devin Leary after this year, and maybe you could get the backup ready. But then again, like if Devin Leary does come back and you blow the freshman's red shirt this year, then he kind of ends up wasting a year of eligibility at your school because he would have wasted a red shirt this year and then he sits again next year. So then he doesn't start until he's a junior.
Yeah, I don't know how many games Morris has played in.
He's played in 2.
2. Yeah. So he's got 2 more.
So he played last week. Actually, he came in I think in their first possession actually, and he overthrew somebody. And then he also played against Charleston Southern earlier in the year.
If I were the NC State coaches, I'd be tempted to try him out against Virginia Tech, a team that is struggling.
Especially coming off the extra week.
Yep.
The extra time to prepare.
Yeah, we're sitting
you go out there and you think, listen, if we're going to try him, we've got some room to maneuver in this game because we've got a really good defense and the Virginia Tech offense hasn't been able to score on anybody. So even if you go into halftime and it's like 6-3 or whatever, and it's not working, you can make that change. You can go back to the starter in the second half if you really wanted to, because it's not like Virginia Tech is going to go out there and blow you off the field and where you can't make up for your mistake. Like you've got some room to maneuver against Virginia Tech.
Now, that said, you know how coaches think. 90% of coaches will tell you games are not won, they are lost. And, I think coaches are always guilty of looking at the downside of something. They're like, well, if we do put him out there and he throws a pick 6 on the first possession, it's game on. And if we come in here and we lose to Virginia Tech, we're going to catch a lot of hell for that. But all that said, they might be building their game plan around Morris starting. We're sitting here talking about Chambers, and we may be way off base. So,
I hope Virginia Tech is also game planning for possibly seeing a lot of Morris. I'm not saying that he's going to start, but I think NC State might be thinking, we can afford to take the chance to start MJ Morris in this game, or at least play him a good amount because we're playing Virginia Tech. He's one of the worst teams in the ACC.
I think you've got to be ready to stack the box against them, whoever their quarterback is. Because it's either going to be an undersized FCS level, probably quarterback, or it's going to be a freshman.
Do we know if he went through spring practice?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
I don't know if he was an early enrollee. I would say probably.
Somebody in the YouTube chat or Jake look that up.
But yeah, I think the main thing for Virginia Tech this week is to stop the running game. And if you can put them in 3rd and 8 situations with either Jack Chambers or a freshman quarterback, then I just think your chances of winning go up exponentially. But if you let them live on 3rd and 2s, then Chambers, even if he can't pass, he's a good runner and he can pick up those yards.
More to get to on the NC State offense. I want to throw it over to Jake for him to confirm that early enrollee thing and also for his first segment.
I believe he was not an early enrollee. It says he was able to take in the spring game, so I believe he was just there as a spectator. So he was not.
Are they actually putting that in bios these days?
It was an article.
It was
that said he'll be on campus soon.
Okay.
And that was from May.
Okay.
So he was not an early enrollee. So it is time for stat time. Most of this is from David Cunningham, our great managing editor, who put this out on Twitter yesterday, but also a little from Scott Glassner, and we have our new fancy graphics here.
Hold it up.
Oh wow, we have a new font.
Yes, and not handwritten anymore. Nick Brown's original graphics have been done away with.
Man, I must have worked 5 minutes on that thing.
Well, so David put out on Twitter last night that Virginia Tech, since 1892, when the program was founded, has only lost every game in October 6 times. Currently 0-3 in the month of October. First one was in 1893.
Oh, yeah. Remember it just like it was yesterday.
And then we all remember the terrible post-World War II years, 1948 through 1952. Virginia Tech did not win.
4 years in a row.
5 years in a row.
5.
Did not win a game in October. 23 consecutive October games.
By the way, can I interrupt here and say that is perceived as one of the reasons Virginia Tech is not in the ACC?
That's correct.
Really?
Was that they were busy de-emphasizing sports right around the time the ACC was formed.
Yep.
And that's why they were so terrible.
Yep. Post World War II, Virginia Tech said, "Yeah, we're just going to be a military school. We're not going to emphasize football or athletics at all." And then the ACC was like, "Hey, we're forming." Oh, but Virginia Tech doesn't want to play major sports. You're not getting in. So
there's also
they had to wait 50 years.
There's also, and I don't know my history on this. Some of the schools in the big, huge, I think it was called the Southern Conference, believed in playing in bowl games. Others didn't. So I think that may have also been a factor. But the truth is, Tech stunk at that point in time.
Yes, they did.
Well, they have not lost every game in October since 1952, but have gone winless in October. That was in 1992. 0-3-1, and that tie came against NC State.
Oh my gosh, a lot of NC State random history right now.
This is the 30-year anniversary of the 1992 season, and I can't think of a better way to celebrate it than
being as worse
winning
as they
2
were,
games
or
again.
being
Right?
as bad.
It is also the last time Virginia Tech had a 5-game losing streak,
right?
Which could happen on
that was the last 5 games of the season of 1992. I think it would have been an 8-game losing streak if not for that tie. It was kind of right in the middle.
Yeah, and I actually remember that
maybe.
day. I took the GMATs that day, which are scaled on a scale of 800. Is the most you can get. I don't know what they're doing now, but that's what they were doing back then. So I took the GMATs on one side of campus here at Tech, destroyed them, got a 740, which is pretty darn good. Ran across campus, got there just in time for the game. And it wasn't that NC State kicked a field goal to tie it as time expired. It was that it was a wounded duck. I can't remember if it was tipped or not, but it was just going sideways. And I believe it even hit the crossbar and bounced over. And State was ranked. I mean, that would have been a big win for Tech. And,
Right.
and they had him, and NC State just dribbles that field goal over as time expires to tie it. And we're all just standing there going, all right, let's go home.
I can't imagine watching ties. Obviously, this is me talking about my age. Like I've never seen a tie. I can't imagine that.
I'm a soccer
being a
fan.
thing.
I see them all the time.
Yeah, and I don't watch soccer.
South
but
Carolina came in here one time, and I think it was my senior year in school, and they had a guy, Todd Ellis, that threw for 400 yards in Lane Stadium, and that wound up being a tie, if I remember correctly. Jake, look it up.
Well, quarterback, a big position to watch for NC State on Thursday, but running back too, when healthy, they've got a decent 1-2 punch with Demi Sumo. I'm not going to say that back half of his last name because I don't know how to. And Jordan Houston. Sumo's been injured. He didn't play in Syracuse, but after the bye week and some time to rest, you can expect him to probably play this week. And he's been pretty good. He has crazy speed and might just have a breakout day in this new formation if they're electing to go with the run game a lot more.
Yeah, Houston was a guy that Tech recruited a little bit out of high school. He went to high school in Northern Virginia, but he commuted every day. He was actually from Maryland. Can you imagine commuting from Maryland to Northern Virginia every day to go to high school?
I would hate that.
I would hate that. But he did it. He's at NC State now. Got a lot of playing time as a true freshman, but
I thought he looked really good.
Hasn't as much
freshman.
the last 2 years. Not the biggest guy in the world, but not a bad runner. But he's good coming out of the backfield too. He can receive. Sumo Kambaye is what we'll call it. Karnbaye.
Yeah,
that's a
Karn
hard,
Sumo
isn't it?
Karnbay.
What's that?
Sumo Karnbay.
Karnbay. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Okay, you did your homework better than we did. And I just wanted to say how really impressed I've been with him as a football player this year, even though I can't pronounce his name. But yeah, he's a good runner, 5.8 yards per carry, 299 yards. He's the only NC State running back with a touchdown this year, or at least a rushing touchdown.
Yeah,
with 3 up.
Houston, and again, this is my roster card window into the world. Houston's carried the ball 76 times, hadn't scored a touchdown. You don't see that very often. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, you could potentially see a third NC State running back, but most likely it'll be the vast majority of these two guys. And that's their best bet to win the football game. They've got to be able to establish a run. If they can't run it on Tech, then they're going to be hard pressed to score, and we're going to have one of those ugly.
It's going to be a rock fight.
Maybe 13-13 at the end of regulation again.
Yeah.
You know, something like that.
So another random stat I want to throw out there. I believe if I remember this from the other day correctly, NC State has thrown 12 touchdown passes on the year. 11 different players have caught those 12 touchdown passes. One guy has 2. That's number 5.
Thayer Thomas. He's a good player.
Thayer Thomas. He's got 2, and 10 other guys have 1. You don't see that sort of thing very often. That is spreading the ball around.
Yeah, absolutely. A big game to stop the run. Hopefully we've been practicing that a lot more in practice recently, given the struggles at Pitt, because this might turn into the same thing with Demi Sumo. I hope not. Getting into the other pieces of this offense, their wide receiver room was pretty hyped up going into this offseason. Obviously, they lost Emeka Mezi to the NFL. He was a great receiver for them last year, but no one has really stepped up in the absence of him except for Thayer Thomas, who has a place in some of the record books at NC State.
I believe he is second all-time in receiving touchdowns behind only Torrey Holt, which is a name everybody will remember. He was a great player. He passed Jericho Cotchery on the list earlier this year, which is, I think, one of the all-time names in college football. Like, I remember when he played when I was in high school and college.
What was that all-time name that you tweeted out last week?
The Duke player. What was his name? Jake.
It was wild.
Look up my tweets from last week. Oh, it was crazy. Jake, look up everything for us.
I can confirm that Tech did tie South Carolina in 1989.
Wow.
89, okay, not 86.
But yeah, it's like they have bodies at wide receiver, but outside of Thomas, it hasn't been an impressive group this year. They did bring in Daryl Jones, the transfer from Maryland.
And Chris, why should Tech fans know about Daryl Jones?
This is a guy who basically did nothing in his career at Maryland, and then played Tech in the bowl game and had 4 catches for, I think, 111 yards. Scored 2 touchdowns his entire career at Maryland. Both came against Virginia Tech in the bowl game.
Bowl. So he sees Virginia Tech on the schedule. He's like, yes,
so like,
I'm going to play good.
If anybody's going to have a big game against Virginia Tech on Thursday night, I guarantee you it'll be Daryl Jones.
I bet he's speaking up in, the position meeting rooms this week. Like, well, actually, when I was playing them last year, blah, blah, blah. But,
I ran right over the pitcher's mound when I scored one of my touchdowns.
Yep.
The freshman linebacker at Duke from London, England, memorable factor.
Memorable factor.
I just no words.
Yeah, you should. He's got brothers and sisters with interesting names as well. His dad's like a big time businessman, like billionaire type. Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Jake, can you verify what I said about 11 different guys catching those 12 touchdown passes? That's one of those stats.
Jake, you were putting Jake to work today.
You're like,
man.
did I dream that?
His last time in the fourth chair, he
That's
is
what the
on.
fourth chair is there for.
Yeah. Mansour Delane obviously played his tail off last week against a couple receivers, and I hope that he's going to be tested more this week, but it's like we talked about earlier, I don't know how much NC State is going to utilize the passing game, but he was listed as the #1 cornerback this week, so that's exciting.
Yes, he is, and so he was basically the #1 cornerback last week, even though he didn't start the game. Now, Brown Murray really struggled on the first possession. I don't know if the plan was to bring in Delane that early or not. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is they played him, I believe, 63 snaps, and Breon Murray only played 13. So he was the primary corner last week. He just didn't start the game. But the thing is, like, you need to get off to a good start in games. Like, if Tech had not given up a touchdown on that first drive, everything else being equal, they would have won the football game. So I think it's important to get off to a good start. So Delane deserves to start. I mean, we've got a big enough sample size right now for me to say that he's Virginia Tech's best cornerback with Dorian Strong out. And I'm really looking forward to getting Strong back whenever that is, because I think when you get those two guys back, that makes you a much better defense. You don't have to worry about the areas outside the hash as much. I think you trust those guys in coverage, and then maybe you can do a few tweaks here and there to help out your safeties, because you don't have to worry about your corners.
Yeah.
In the past, there's been a lot of great Virginia Tech cornerbacks. You think about, the duo of Jermaine Waller and Caleb Farley, and that was limited in the fact that, one of them was always hurt. And I hope that's not the case with Delane and Strong, and hopefully they're both able to play up to their potential together on the field at the same time for a couple of years.
That 2019 duo was awesome. Like, and the thing is, Waller was so good, but he doesn't get the credit because Farley was like totally dominant. But Waller was probably the 3rd or 4th best corner in the country that year.
He was one of the best cover corners in the country, and all anybody did was talk about Caleb Farley.
Because he was only the 2nd best corner on his team, right? But that's how good we were on the outside that year. Brian Mitchell, current NC State cornerbacks coach.
We'll
did
get to that.
did a fantastic job developing those players. And so yeah, I think when you can have two really good corners on the outside like that, it really helps you from a schematic standpoint defensively. At least theoretically, it should. I look back at 2019 and like those corners were dominant and it helped Tech a lot. If they just had a little bit better safety play, then like it would have been really difficult to complete a pass on Virginia
And how
Tech
was
that
the
year.
linebacker play in 2019?
It was okay. It was above average. I mean, you had
Tisdale was a key guy.
Rayshard
Rook,
Ashby,
yep.
and Tisdale was like splitting time with Dax at the backer spot.
Yeah.
Was there something that we needed to?
12 different NC State players have caught a touchdown pass this year.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
One of them's got two, and all the others have one. Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I want to get to the offensive line. They lost a lot of key pieces on offense in the offseason, but the most impactful was Ike Ekwonu, an offensive tackle that went first round to the Panthers. So this was a big year to see how the offensive line would really adjust in the absence with him. And this offensive line has been great so far, so this will be a big test for Tech.
I think they've done fine. I think their biggest issue is like they don't have quality across the board at wide receiver, and you know, maybe they're giving the majority of the carries to Houston when it should be flipped.
Yeah, and I think we left this out. Houston's only averaging 4 yards a carry.
Right. But you know, on the whole, I think their offensive line has been solid, particularly in pass protection. They'll play 7 guys there. They have the luxury of actually having a backup that Virginia Tech recruited. Oh my gosh, what was his name? He is not. Oh yeah, there he is. Bryson Spees. Virginia Tech recruited him. I don't know if Tech like really pursued him hard because they weren't sure how big he was going to get. And you know, he started some for NC State. He's played both guard spots, both tackle spots. Right now, he's currently second string, but he still plays, and he can play any one of those roles.
And is he the one with like 800 career snaps? They've got a backup with 800 career snaps.
No, he's got like 1,900 career snaps.
An insane. Right. There's another guy with an insane number.
So they've got a number of guys on their offensive line that have played a lot of snaps in their careers, even though they did lose a very good player.
General offensive takeaways for the Wolfpack before we break. They've struggled to score more than 21 points against any team with a pulse, likely story. And that was even with Devin Leary. So our defense could play well in this game. That's something to watch.
I feel like with extra time to prepare, with a backup quarterback for NC State in there, whoever it might be.
Right.
I feel like there's not any excuses for not having a good game defensively this week. I feel like the Virginia Tech will play a pretty good defensive game this week, and they will have an opportunity to win the game in the fourth quarter.
If they defend the run well, as you said earlier, I mean, it's game on. Anything can happen. And we'll get into things like turnover margin and stuff like that later.
Yep. Well, that'll wrap up the first half, but before we break, let's check back in with Jake in the fourth chair.
All right, well, you guys mentioned that this is the first time that Tech is going down to Raleigh since 2010, so I did a little digging on what was going on in the world on October 2nd, 2010, the last time these two teams played. The number one song was Just the Way You Are by Bruno Mars.
That song's that old? Wow.
Yeah. The Social Network had just come out in theaters the day before.
That's a good flick.
Haven't seen it.
Grant Wells had turned 10 years old a few months earlier.
Oh my
And had thrown for 2,500 yards for his Little League team.
And something else, I found another little connection here. That game was also an unranked Virginia Tech team against the number 23 ranked NC State.
Well, they're 23 in the coaches poll.
Right.
There you go.
There you go.
So a little connection there. And now we get to see Tech go down to Raleigh, once every 4 years? So hopefully we won't be having this segment.
I've still never seen Tech play down there.
Me either. This will be my first time.
Yeah, and
I'm so
I kind of wish,
excited.
obviously in hindsight, I wish I'd gone in 2010. But like this year, I'm like, we're just. I kind of want to go now because I do think Tech has an opportunity to win the football game. But,
3.5 hour drive. It's not bad.
It's not bad.
I'm going
It'll
because
be a
Malcolm
great
wouldn't.
atmosphere. I think the tailgating scene is going to be great.
So are you going to go to that Triangle Hooky Club tailgate? What are you going to do?
I don't think so. My family and I were invited to another tailgate that was nearby. I might, walk over there. I'm sure I'm going to recognize a good amount of people from over there, but we're not eating at that, I don't think.
Yeah, you got to pay if you want to eat.
Yeah.
And drink.
I want to get my North Carolina barbecue at some point, though. Maybe we'll do that before the game.
That's the
and then
main
head over.
purpose of the whole trip.
It actually is. Yeah. No, I'm joking. But all right, that'll lead us into our break here on episode 266 of the Tech Sideline podcast. sponsored by First.
Presented by.
Okay, we'll get it right the next time. Presented by First Bank and Trust. Talked a lot about what this new version of the NC State offense is going to look like on Thursday. And on the other half, we'll take a look at the strength of this team, which is their veteran defense. Make sure you stay with us. We'll be right back. We welcome you back into episode 266 of the Tech Sideline podcast, presented by First Bank and Trust. As a reminder, if you're watching on YouTube, continue to drop any questions you have for Will and Chris in the comments, and we'll get to those at the end of the show. We're talking about, okay, Will's wearing sunglasses now, and I'm caught off guard.
You know what I've never done to you? I've never messed. I used to mess with Evan. Evan would sit over here, and I would like take the the gnomes and like go over in front of the camera while he was doing his read, and
it never messed him up.
it never messed him up. He'd go right through.
Yep.
Okay, if you're not
gotta-
watching on YouTube, you need to be watching on
gotta start
YouTube to
messing.
understand what's going on right now. But
No, I'll take them off. I just thought I'd see if I could rattle you.
it's making me a better podcast host. I need to not flinch next time you do something like that. All right. Well, when talking about NC State in the preseason, it was this side of the ball that stood out the most. They've consistently gotten better on defense the past couple years, and that's largely part due to the coaching changes. I can't talk. Now I'm rattled. A specifically emotional game for NC State's defensive line coach and Charlie Wiles as he looks over to the opposing sideline and sees a team that he coached for 23 years.
And it's going to see a few players that he recruited too, like Norrell Pollard, Mario Kendricks.
It was interesting. I was looking through the photos from the COVID game in 2020, and
That was his first game at NC State.
yeah, and
Really? Oh, I didn't think he had played Tech yet
it was a
since being
season
there.
opener. Yeah.
But I guess that one did. I mean, there was 1,000 people in
Exactly,
attendance, so it was
yeah.
different. But
And
still,
so our photographers were not there. Of course, they only allow one photographer on, maybe two photographers on the field. And so Matt Gentry of the Roanoke Times was doing ACC pool photography, and the very last photo is Charlie Wiles like hugging a former player. I didn't even sorry, I didn't look to see who it was, but I was just like, oh yeah,
He got such a great deal, and I know he probably didn't feel this way at the time.
yeah.
But at the time, Virginia Tech was not offering great salaries for assistant coaches. They are now, but they weren't then. So he went down to NC State, got a huge raise,
from like 350 to 500 or something like that.
or something like that.
Yeah.
It was a substantial raise. He's got family in Raleigh, and it's a lot closer to the place he loves to go in the off season, which is the beach.
Yeah.
That guy's living the great life down there.
Not to mention, there's
I mean,
a lot of good
like-
D-line
like-
prospects that come out of that area.
Exactly. The Raleigh-Durham area has more than doubled in population over the last 30 years, and there's just a ton of prospects down there. And that's one of the reasons why both North Carolina and UNC are good, or excuse me, North Carolina and NC State are both really good programs right now, is because the talent level in that area of the state has just increased so much over the years. I mean, there's like 8 or 9 key players on NC State's defense that grew up within like an hour of NC State's campus.
Yeah, so we need to do a study at some point in time. We need to start about 20 years ago and map out the number of 4-star and 5-star recruits from the state of Virginia versus North Carolina. And the state of Virginia from a recruiting ranking standpoint, used to produce more talent than the state of North Carolina. But I think over the last 20 years, you've seen it do this. And that's also reflected in the number of NFL
players. So in 2011, there were 50 NFL players from the state of North Carolina. And in 2021, there were 61.
Yeah.
And in the state of Virginia, it's done the opposite.
Yep.
And over that stretch, the NFL players from Virginia has dropped. So the talent level has shifted, partially just due to demographics. There's so many areas of this state, particularly the area where I'm from, which used to produce people like David Wilson,
Yep.
where
Logan
the
Thomas
population has actually dropped because of the lack of jobs and things like that. So the next David Wilson, maybe because his parents had to leave Danville because they can't find a job anymore, but they moved to Raleigh. The next David Wilson might play for NC State just because of shifting demographics. And I think that's been I think they're well coached, but I think, over time, I just think the demographic shifts in this region have been to their benefit.
Oh, yeah.
It was always sad to see Charlie Wiles go. He was Bud's right-hand man. His Twitter profile picture is still him and Bud with the lunch pail and PKs. I mean, how much more Virginia Tech can you get?
Charlie is a great guy, too. Like, one of the best guys you'll ever talk to.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to talk to him much when he was here because we didn't have media access until 2012. And then I just really wasn't a post-game interview guy. But I do remember one time being around him, and this is an obscure story. There was a defensive end recruit named Mike Brown out of, I think, Florida. And it was long enough ago that everybody was comparing everybody to Corey Moore.
Right.
And Brown was like that. He was smaller and had a reputation for being a nut on the football field. And he came to Tech and he never made an impact and he left. And I remember, I think I told this story to Pearson Prelo one time or Torian Gray. I said, so I asked Charlie about Mike Brown one time and Charlie said, he just cinched up his belt and he said, Mike was in Coach Beamer's office just a little bit too much. And I think it was Torian Gray I was telling that story to, and he busted out laughing. He said, that's Charlie.
Yeah, that's That's accurate.
So sorry to derail the podcast.
No, that's
for an
fine. That's
obscure
fine.
story.
We're saying this because we all like Charlie Wiles very
Right.
much.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave Doran not only brought in Charlie Wiles, but you mentioned it earlier, Chris, Brian Mitchell as well, who's coaching their cornerbacks. I think it was a smart move by Doran to poach these guys, especially from a recruiting standpoint, because they were used to already, recruiting a lot of guys from the state of North Carolina, as Virginia Tech has recently. And now NC State and UNC have ramped up their, keeping guys home. And they really have. When you look at NC State's roster, especially defensively, it's just North Carolina guy after North Carolina guy.
Fuente was under a lot of pressure to get better at in-state recruiting. So when they made the schematic change after, Bud Foster retired, the only way to improve in-state recruiting is to, change coaches to a certain extent, right? So he had to shuffle in some assistants. So he basically took 2 out-of-state recruiters and Wiles and Mitchell and just didn't renew their contracts and replaced them with, Darryl Tapp and Ryan Smith is an in-state focus. Unfortunately, COVID hit 3 months later, and those guys could never go out on the road and recruit. But Mitchell was obviously used to recruiting in North Carolina with Caleb Farley, and Wiles had been recruiting in North Carolina for Virginia Tech. So those were natural fits for NC State. And NC State needed improved coaching at the time, too, and those guys are excellent coaches. And, Doran retooled his whole defensive staff after the 2019 season when they went 4-8, and they haven't looked back. That they've, he just made just a couple of coaching staff tweaks, and they've become a much better program. And that was just great hires for him. I thought they were both great fits from a coaching standpoint, and plus from the areas those guys are used to recruiting. I don't think you can.
Well, and I think the one thing you could question is Charlie had coached in a Bud Foster scheme for so long.
And Charlie, right.
But he's doing well in a
3-man line.
Scheme.
That plays a nose guard. So Charlie has always been a really good coach, but the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but he had to learn how to coach in a new scheme in his 50s. That's hard, man. But he's been able to do it. So I think right now, you could look at Charlie and say, that guy's a complete football coach now, a complete defensive line coach. He's coached in 2 different style schemes for 3 different head coaches now. And now under 2 different defensive coordinators.
I'll bet if you asked Charlie, though, he would say, you know what, most of us can coach any scheme if we've got good players, and we've got good players.
The interesting thing is you look at some of the players that he's coaching now, like Savion Jackson, one of their starting defensive ends. Jackson visited Virginia Tech multiple times. He ended up, he's from down there. He's from Clayton, right around, the Raleigh area.
That's where J.R. Walker's
I was
from.
going to say J.R. Walker's
It's hard to beat out UNC and NC State from players in their own backyard. Just like it would be hard for them to beat out Virginia Tech for a player from Roanoke. Problem is there are hardly any players from Roanoke, and there's a bunch of players from Raleigh. Yeah. So Savion Jackson was recruited by Charlie to Virginia Tech. Ended up picking NC State over Tech and Alabama, and now he's being coached by Charlie Wiles. And I think if it was just if he made his decision based on pure what coach he wanted to play for the most, he would have picked Virginia Tech in the beginning. But in the end, you're right there at Raleigh. Why go that far away when a place that can make you happy is right at home?
Yeah.
It's interesting how things work out. It kind of reminded me of how Henry Coleman from Richmond, a guy that we recruited so heavily to play here at Virginia Tech, he goes to Duke, and then he transfers to Texas A&M to be coached by Buzz, who recruited him to Virginia.
Right.
Talking basketball.
Yes, switching to basketball. I think, Charlie Wiles' family and Brian Mitchell's family really enjoyed being at Virginia Tech. I went to high school with both of their kids, and they always loved going to Virginia Tech. So it was kind of weird to see the shift of when, the social media posts changed to pictures from Carter Finley Stadium and things like that.
Sad.
That's
It really is. I still follow. Normally, I don't follow somebody when they leave like that, but I still follow Charlie. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it'll be interesting for him. You mentioned it earlier. We can go ahead and talk about, Charlie Wiles' guys up front, obviously led by Savion Jackson. A couple other names there, Davin Van, who does a good job, 3.5 tackles for a loss, 2 sacks. Corey Duran, and then Joshua Harris, who you said has a bright future.
I think Harris does. Bigger nose guard prospect. He was a pretty highly touted recruit out of the state of North Carolina. I think he was another one of those Raleigh area guys. Their defensive ends are good. I talked about Savion Jackson, and I think Van is very good as well. And, both of those guys have another year or 2 left. So, and I think most of their front 6 It looks like they returned 4 starters for the next year. They'll have some holes to fill in the secondary.
It's going to be interesting to see those defensive ends. Davin Van is 6'2", 295, and Savion Jackson is 6'2", 290.
Now keep in mind.
I know it's a 3-4.
It's not a 3-4. It's a 3-3-5.
3-3-5.
This is the old Rich Rod defense, basically. I don't know if you could call them a 3-3-5 stack defense, but it's a 3-3-5 defense. It's changed and adapted throughout the course of the years.
So will they put 5 guys on the line a lot?
That could be multiple front, sure.
Yeah.
But Tony Gibson, who was Rich Rod's defensive coordinator, or not defensive coordinator, he was a defensive backs coach at West Virginia. I believe he was at Michigan and then Arizona. He was hired as co-defensive coordinator at NC State, and then after that 2019 season, the other co-defensive coordinator, I guess, got pushed out, and he got pushed up, and he has completely changed their fortunes as far as their defensive performances.
Well, he did his time.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a veteran. Just a veteran of working under a lot of different coaches, and he knows that scheme at this point like the back of his hand. So I think, and they've been able to do good job recruiting to that scheme. So yeah, I mean, you look at their defensive ends. Their defensive ends are their defensive tackle size for a program like Virginia Tech that would run a 4-man line.
Yeah.
Brian Mitchell's group has proven to be pretty stout against the pass. A lot of experience there with 4 seniors and a redshirt sophomore, but the redshirt sophomore isn't messing around. Aiden White, who has 3 interceptions on the year.
He's been a good player for them. I think their nickelback, Tyler Baker-Williams, has been a very good player for them. Overall, they've got a lot of experience back there. They've got a couple of redshirt seniors, a couple of true seniors, and then a sophomore. Right. So I think. Look, it's not easy for Tech to throw the ball on anybody, right? Anybody not named Wofford at this point. But yeah, this is going to be a challenging defense. I think Peyton Wilson at linebacker, it's kind of hard to say because he was such a talented recruit, and Virginia Tech basically, I think, finished second for him to NC State, maybe second or third, something like that.
Peyton Wilson led the conference in tackles a couple of years ago.
He did.
I know last year he had a season-ending injury at some point in the year, and then Drake Thomas really stepped up in that role, who's been really good this year too.
Who also Virginia Tech recruited heavily, who was also from the Raleigh area. So
tough.
That program, they're doing a great job keeping their players at home, and if they keep doing that, they're going to stay good because there's a lot of talent in that area. But yeah, Peyton Wilson's, he's been an inconsistent player in his career, partly because of a couple of injuries. I mean, I think he tore his ACL even when he was in high school. I
can't believe he's a redshirt junior.
Is he
he's
really
been there that long?
Yeah.
You'll
look at some of his stat lines, and they'll be very impressive. But like, he's not a consistent across the board player. Like he will make some mistakes and get burned sometimes. So if you can take advantage of anybody on defense, it's probably him. But at the same time, he's probably one of the guys who's most likely to generate a big play on their defense. He's that type of player. And I think Drake Thomas is good. I think Isaiah Moore is good. Isaiah Moore is from Richmond. And
LC Bird, I guess he played with Jaden Payute.
Yeah, I guess, and he would have been like their top linebacker right after Rayshard Ashby was there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Correct.
One of these guys is still playing college ball, one is not.
No. We did evaluate Isaiah Moore when Bud was a defensive coordinator, and we chose not to offer him.
Yeah.
And NC State was his only Power 5 offer. Okay. So NC State's defense is made up of like four-star guys that everybody wanted, like Peyton Wilson and Savion Jackson, but it's also made up of guys like Isaiah Moore that nobody wanted.
And Virginia Tech can be that program too. Get guys in here, develop them.
We've got to make sure we don't miss the Isaiah Moores.
I know.
Right.
Yeah.
Dave Doran mentioned Isaiah Moore as the alpha of the football team. So he's obviously grown into a really influential role there. That group of linebackers is a trio that everyone would want on their team. So they're going to be pretty lethal.
It's a good group, and they've all got a ton of experience too.
Yeah. I just mentioned Jaden Payton, and I'm like, man, if he could have stayed healthy, we could have really used him right now.
Yes, we could have used wide receiver to stretch the field. Yeah.
So where does NC State's defense rank? You looked up their FEI rankings, right? Is it 13th?
I think it's 13th. Yeah, something like that.
And that's an efficiency metric.
Yeah, that's an efficiency metric. But basically, they're either the first or second best defense Tech has faced this year. From an FEI metric perspective, they're slightly better than the Pitt defense, which is ironic considering the Tech's best offensive performance came against Pitt, who to date has been the best defense they faced. So maybe there's something to that. But in reality, in practice, I actually think they're I think Pitt's maybe better in some spots. Like they've got an All-American defensive tackle, of
See,
course.
that was the big surprise was that defensive tackle for Pitt did not have a great game.
Right, didn't have a great day. I think NC State's maybe better across the board than Pitt. They don't have like one awesome standout like Pitt does.
Their safety play, I wasn't even going to mention it because I don't think it's incredible there.
It's not incredible, but it's solid across the board.
Yeah.
There's like not you don't look at it and say, oh man, yeah, we've got the personnel to attack that. Because we haven't been able to do that really all year.
So let me ask you a question, and this is kind of just for fun. Go ahead.
I was going to say they're more like the Miami defense, except more consistent than the Miami defense. That's a fun thought.
So maybe they'll blow the game in the fourth quarter and let up 14 points.
I doubt
nice.
it.
So I know you're not a football coach, but I just keep wanting, like, Tech has to stretch the field. I just keep wanting them to just put Cole Beck down there at the end of the line. I understand he hasn't played football for years. You don't want him in there for 50 or 60 snaps. Mm-hmm. But what is stopping a 2-5 team from putting him way down there at the end of the line and just saying, run as fast as you can run and throwing it up to him?
I don't know.
Don't want to have any fun?
I mean, everything I've heard is that he struggles to catch the football. Mm-hmm. So... Well,
we had a bye week, so a little more practice time. Maybe we'll see him.
If they do it, fine. If they don't do it, I also don't care. I don't think it matters at this point. but
I just want to do something fun.
Yeah. I'd rather run a jet sweep to the boundary with him, personally. If you
really
want to have fun.
On 3rd and 11.
We'll see how creative this Virginia Tech offense can be after the bye week if they shake up some things at all. I know that Coach Pry mentioned that in the press conference, how they were kind of working on that. So adjustments will be interesting.
Oh man, so he went there, huh? He's like promising to look for something different.
Got to change this vanilla offense somehow.
Basically, he said earlier this week, we've been trying to be a 2 tight end, smash him in the face, and we learned that couldn't work. It's kind of what he said, earlier this week. So, and you saw a few changes they did against Miami. Like they actually ran a read option and optioned the defensive tackle on the first play of the game, and it worked for a 16-yard game. We hadn't been doing any of that all year. We have to be doing more of that stuff. We have to. I mean, people make fun of the smoke and mirrors offense, but like Virginia Tech, we can't be Penn State and just line up and smack people or Wisconsin. That's not who we are. And quite frankly, it would take years to build that up, and nobody has that kind of patience these days. And I just don't think that would work for Virginia Tech because I don't think there's enough good offensive linemen in this state for that to work.
I think one of the most interesting storylines in Virginia Tech football is what's going to happen with the offense long term.
Right. So and I'm not saying I want Brad Cornelson back as offensive coordinator, but we have to have that type of approach. Like we have to have a more cerebral approach to offensive football than we've had so far this year.
Get guys out of position, create mismatches and exploit them, what every other offense does.
Right.
There's a reason you see Dax Hollifield covering guys 20 and 30 yards downfield because the opposing offensive coordinator has created that mismatch.
Right.
And that's not to disparage Dax. His coverage grades are actually halfway decent. He's just not a guy that can cover 30 yards downfield.
Well, they've been perfect throws too.
Yes.
I mean, absolute perfect throws. So I don't think that Dax he hadn't done much wrong this year.
Yeah.
Quick note on special teams. Not something the Wolfpack has had to worry about at all this year since their kicker is 100% accurate. 14 of 14 on the year. I mean, last week against Syracuse, they had 3 field goals. So I guess that's something you don't have to worry about when you see your kicker walk up there. You know what's going in.
I believe he's their all-time leading scorer.
I think that's what you wrote in the preview.
Yeah. And he can make them. I think his longest this year is from like 53 yards. So
if the game comes down to a field goal, then they're in good shape.
Well, Tech has done well with their field goals this year. We've only missed one, I believe.
One, I think.
But we've also had some shaky snapping. So this guy's a career starter. Christopher Dunn is. I think he's 5th or 6th year, and it's been a great career. So if it comes down to a game of field goals, then yes, you have to.
He's a mid-season All-American, right?
I would think so.
I think
you don't get better in 14 of 14.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty good. It's like me being a Ravens fan with Justin Tucker. Life is good in the kicking game. A couple more things to get to ahead of the game on Saturday, but let's throw it over to Jake in the 4th chair.
Well, you guys were talking about trying to mix things up off a bye week, and a lot of times a lot can be made about how coaches perform with a little bit of extra time to prepare. Katie just mentioned her Ravens. I'll mention my Titans. On Sunday, Mike Vrabel went to 5-0 as the Titans head coach coming off a bye, outscoring opponents by 18 points per game. So I saw that stat, and I wanted to see how Tech has done recently off a bye week. And I was
I don't think it's
You
good,
were less
right?
than impressed.
I honestly, just off the top of my head, I thought it was going to be pretty good.
I remember Justin Fuente's tenure was not good after a bye week,
Virginia
if I'm
Tech
correct.
has lost their last 6 games coming off of a bye. Have not won since we mentioned on the last podcast, I believe, the 59-7 win over North Carolina in 2017. That was the last win off a bye.
And it's sad because we didn't even need a bye week to beat them by 52. They were so bad at the time.
Was that 45-10 Duke win? Was that after a bye week?
So I
Yes,
have
loss.
written down.
Yeah.
Loss.
Well,
Yeah.
Duke won.
Oh, Duke won. Yeah, yeah.
I have written down 3 of the 6 losses that have come off a bye week. That is one of them. 45-10 loss to Duke.
Ugh.
The Georgia Tech Thursday night blowout in 2018 was also after a bye, and the ODU loss 49-35, the first one.
Was it really?
Also off a bye.
Well, okay. That wasn't a like. Well, it was kind of a bye.
Tech played Friday and then played the
No,
following.
he's talking about the ODU game in
2018.
2018.
It was not supposed to be a bye the
Yes,
week
it was
before
the
because the East
ECU.
Carolina game
Yes,
got
that's
canceled.
right.
So Tech didn't find out that game was canceled until midweek.
Too late to
so
do anything.
Too late to like really turn the bye week into a real bye week.
So we'll scratch that one off the list.
Right. Now, did you read my Q&A on Friday?
I did. I don't remember.
There was
what-
one whole question covering the last 5 bye games at Virginia Tech.
Oh.
Yeah. So you did read it, but not closely.
Oh, when I turned 40, my brain quit retaining stuff.
You know, the funny thing is, like, Tech's, a lot of the recent bye week losses, we've actually prepared for them really well. Like, one of them was the loss to Notre Dame in South Bend in 2019, where we basically used our 3rd string quarterback and almost won. We were very well prepared for that game. Another one was Notre Dame last season. Almost won the game against a top 10 team. We were very well prepared for that game. Clemson was another one in 2020 where we came in with a great game plan, and then the hooker forgot it on the first drive of the game and got benched as a result.
Yeah.
So
Was it the Clemson game that he had the hand thing? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That they
Well,
did a
that
whole-
was but he got benched in the first quarter because if you remember, Tech's game plan was to run the play clock down to 3 seconds every time to limit Clemson on offense, and he goes out there on the first drives and snaps it with like 20 seconds.
15 and 20 seconds.
Yeah,
on the
exactly.
clock.
So he forgot the game plan from the very opening drive, and they took him out of the game. And even then, it was like a 7-point game late in the 3rd quarter. And remember, they had to bring in Knox Kadum too because
Burmeister
got hurt. So Tech was very well prepared for that football game, with the exception of Hooker, who I don't think he didn't have his mind in the game anymore at that point at Virginia Tech. And I don't want to start that conversation.
No.
But
That's a separate podcast. as
but
we
point
like to
being,
say.
Tech's like most recent performances after a bye. It's sometimes it's about who you play too and what players you have available. And like, no question in my mind that if Hooker had been available for that 2019 Notre Dame game, Tech would have won that game by a couple of scores. They were extremely well prepared. But yes, you're right. Recent results, the final scores have not been good after a bye week.
Well, new coach, and maybe Brent Pry's got some stuff up his sleeve for Thursday night.
I hope so.
I really hope so.
Really hope so.
Yeah, I would really do anything for us to win this game. I mean, that would be such a momentum shift in the season. Going into the back half with, it's a little bit easier, but nothing's easy this
thought
year
it was
for
going
this
to be
team.
easier. But
We
is
thought
it
Wofford
actually?
would be a blowout, and it wasn't.
Didn't
so,
know Duke was going to be
Here's
good.
the thing. We thought it was going to be
Right.
easier, but like, because we were playing like West Virginia earlier.
because we're like, oh, Liberty.
well, guess what? Now Duke is probably a better football team than West Virginia.
Duke might be ranked 2. We said there was a chance that Liberty is going to be ranked. Duke might be ranked
Who does
2.
Duke play this week? And the
I
next
don't
week?
know.
I'm not sure either.
Jake?
But
For sure.
Duke.
yes, Duke football schedule.
Duke plays Jacksonville. Sorry, that's their men's basketball.
I was going to say what?
I should have assumed that if I look up Duke,
They got
State
promoted.
basketball
They
comes
got
up
promoted
first.
to the AFC.
They are on a bye this week.
Oh, okay.
They play Boston College.
All right.
Okay,
Should-
well,
2
that's a
weeks
win.
where they're not
That's
going to lose a
should
game.
be
On
a
a Friday
win.
night.
They did just lose to Georgia Tech a couple weeks
Yeah,
ago.
and then they beat
so
Miami by 24, and Miami had 8 turnovers.
What a clown show
Miami's
that was.
program is never going to recover from a Duke player breaking the U on his knee in Hard Rock Stadium.
Oh,
a Duke
that's
player.
awesome. That is fantastic.
If you haven't seen that video,
It's
Duke
hilarious.
with attitude.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. They
be
actually we were having this conversation before the podcast about people watching sports and saying, "Oh, I could do that that major league hitter just did, or that Division I defensive back just did, or whatever." And most of the time, people who say that have probably never played sports before. They don't know anything what it's like. Now, a Duke defensive back did do something on Saturday that I could have done. There was an interception in that game where there was literally not a Miami receiver anywhere in the screen. It was that bad. Like, there's just a Duke player just standing there, and the Miami quarterback just kind of floated it to him. And it's like that scene in the movie The Waterboy, which is Brent Pry's favorite football movie, where Bobby Boucher just throws the ball to the defensive lineman just so he could tackle him. and so it was, and then the guy's like, "Thank you." And that's what happened to the Duke player. Like, they just handed him the ball basically, and he ran it in for a touchdown. I could have probably done that.
Was that the same one where he broke the U on his knee?
I don't remember if that was the same one or not. There were a lot of plays where Duke players had the opportunity to do that.
What a time to be alive. Duke dancing in the locker room at Hard Rock after beating Miami convincingly.
So Jake, did you have anything else? Because we kind of railroaded.
Yeah, sorry about that, Jake.
No, that is it.
Okay, sounds good. Well, getting into game picks, Virginia Tech has now lost 4 straight games. Hard to believe. We said earlier in the year that this could happen given that gauntlet of an October schedule, and it has proven to be very hard. 5 straight losses is a factor. Wolfpack favored by 13.5 right now, and the environment is certainly going to be a challenge. That's something that I don't really think this Virginia Tech team has been tested with this year. UNC, that's not a hard environment to play in. Pitt, you're in an NFL stadium that's not full. So ODU is really the toughest environment that they've played in thus far.
That was half Tech fans.
Right, exactly. And Carter Finley is going to be a lot more jazzed up than that. So did that play a role in you all's picks this week, just the environment that they're going to go into?
It didn't, because I think they'll be excited to play. Great, don't get me wrong, it's exciting to play in Lane Stadium, but not when half the crowd's emptied out by the fourth quarter, right? And I think that they'll go into an engaged crowd that is excited to have a ranked team. Even though they've lost their starting quarterback. And I think it'll be exciting for them to play in a new environment. Generally, whenever Tech gets to play in a new environment, like you said, it's somewhere where the home crowd isn't great. And I'm not saying Carter Finley's going to be Lane Stadium with Inner Sandman and all that, but it's going to be good. And it'll be
they're good crowd.
Yeah. Like if this is the type of thing you sign up for as a football player. Now, Tech has had some penalty issues on both sides of the ball, but on offense as well. So they're going to have to make sure they get their cadences right and they limit their false starts and things like that. But it should not have an effect when you consider that. I don't think NC State's going to be playing a capable quarterback in this game. Just the fact that the game is in Carter Finley, I guess it would be better to have him in Lane, but I just don't think it matters in this case. I think Tech is capable if they don't turn the football over and don't have penalties and they can manage the clock. I think they'll have an opportunity to win the football game.
Right. To be clear, none of us picked Tech to win, but we are talking about pathways to victory here. And so to build on what Chris said, if these two teams go out there and play their regular game, then even with NC State's quarterback issues, I like their chances to score more than I like Tech. So Chris picked, for example, NC State 20, Virginia Tech 10. If you want that not to happen in your Virginia Tech, then you need to get a turnover, a big turnover. You need to make a big special teams play. So the numbers I ran on that are unfortunately discouraging. So let me find that in the So Virginia Tech is 126 in the nation out of 131 teams in forcing turnovers. So Tech doesn't force turnovers. Number 126 in punt returns, and number 86 in kickoff returns. So the evidence is not there to indicate that that sort of thing is going to happen. Now it could, Chambers, if he plays, could serve up a pick six to Mansour Delane or something like that. So going back to that Boston College game we're talking about in 1998, part of the reason Tech won 17-0 was they had an interception return for a touchdown. So you need those kind of things to break Virginia Tech's way. Their performance so far this year says that's not likely. So my pick was, what did I pick? 24-13 NC State.
I actually thought about picking it even lower, like something like 13-9 or something.
I've done that sort of thing in the past, and the points always seem to be there.
Right.
That
somehow they get scored, even
if
though it
both
doesn't make
offenses
sense.
suck.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Georgia Tech and Virginia played a 16-9 game the other
true.
night.
That's
you know,
true.
So it can happen.
Yeah, no, this is actually, it's a golden opportunity for Tech because it's possible they could get a backup quarterback 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
If Jeff Sims is still out. So
I looked up, the status of him today because I was curious, and I don't
And there's
know.
nothing out there, right?
It just says it's a foot/ankle injury,
Right.
which that's not good to
That's-
play
that's
on.
not good,
so I wouldn't
especially
expect him, honestly.
considering like he's a mobile guy,
Right.
So he won't be as effective if he can't lose his legs. So sneak away out of Raleigh with a win, and you come back to Blacksburg and Sims can't play, then all of a sudden you're 4-5 and people are feeling better. Now
Then you're playing Duke.
yeah, we'll definitely
And
beat
that's an
them.
easy win.
Right.
But then you got to go to
But
Liberty.
it would be kind of
Yeah.
fool's gold because you beat 2 straight backup quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Right.
That's all
But
right, though.
I will take fool's gold at this point.
Exactly.
But as bad as the season's gone so far, it would be nice to kind of end it on a high note. Hopefully, if you can get a win or two or stack a couple wins, I mean, it's possible with the back end of the schedule. We'll see. So everyone picked NC State. I just went and checked. The fans have NC State to win by 11 plus. Probably going to be a low-scoring game. Current standings are Chris and David leading the way, 6-2 on their picks for the year, and the more optimistic one, Will, is 4-4.
Chris and David are 5-2, and Will is 4-3.
Oh,
4-3.
I did my math wrong. Okay.
And I'm behind because I actually picked Tech to beat Miami.
And West
Yep.
Virginia.
One or two more plays, and I was almost right.
And West Virginia, right?
Yeah, but what was it? You picked
I
BC to
picked
win.
BC to beat Tech. Yeah.
so-
Yeah. You would have hoped that we could have gotten one of those, West Virginia or Miami, but just wasn't the case.
I'm on a 5-game heater here. I picked the first 2 games of the season incorrectly. Now I've got 5 in a row.
Right.
Picking Tech to lose is apparently the way to go.
It's apparently a good proposition.
So we come out of these seasons like 6-6 and stuff like that, and this year is going to be different.
Yeah.
We're all going to have winning records picked.
Yeah. Now this is a week though where like we could all be wrong this
It would
week.
not surprise.
It would
me.
not surprise me if Tech won because
Yeah.
I don't think that their offense is going to be any good. NC State's offense is going to be any good at all with a backup quarterback.
Yeah.
Well, since this is our only podcast of the week, we'll switch it up and do ACC Power Rankings in the preview episode. So I'm going to go ahead and welcome David Cunningham to the set for that.
All right.
You're up, David.
I completely forgot that I had to do this, so I'm a fresh set of eyes looking at it in real time.
Indeed.
We can go ahead and start at the top. Clemson at 1, Wake at 2. Syracuse stays at 3 for both of you after the loss to Clemson, but what a game there.
Oh, what a game. I think
Syracuse had the game in the bag.
They played not to lose in the second
Well,
half
you've got-
instead
you-
of playing
but
to
they
win.
only
you
how
got to
many
give Sean
touches
Tucker,
did Sean Tucker
5 or
have?
6.
5.
Yeah.
No,
Five.
listen. I've seen.
Why did they do that?
I've
This
seen.
is like Raheem Blackshear last year.
Yes.
This is check with me stuff that I know Tech fans hate, but I'm telling them every school does it. You watch the Clemson Wake Forest game this year, and then you watch the Clemson Syracuse game, and the Clemson defense. Only in the fourth quarter against Wake, but the whole game against Syracuse, they manipulated the offense into calling what Clemson wanted them to call. Like after Wake just torched the Clemson secondary for 3 quarters, they kept both safeties back. And in your check with me call at the line of scrimmage, that means you check into a running play, right? And so Wake just started running it in the fourth quarter because that's how
That's what
Clemson lined
was
up.
showing. Yeah.
So that's what Clemson did the other day. They lined up
opposite,
and
though.
said, "Pass the ball on us."
Yeah.
Right. And it probably wasn't enough time for Clawson to adjust because Clemson made the adjustment
It was
late
in the-
in that
it was
game.
in the fourth-
They did it from
Dino had plenty
He
of
had
time
he had
to
halftime
adjust.
to do it because you looked at that at
And
halftime and you're like 2 carries.
Did you see when he came out yesterday and spoke to the media? He
Yeah.
basically apologized and was like,
Right.
like Sean Tucker should have gotten more touches.
Right. So yes, I've seen the Clemson coaching staff kind of manipulate their way to 2 wins this year just based on how they align their defense, which is my issue with the whole check with me offenses throughout college football. Like you can get the other team to call what you want them to call sometimes.
It also helps when you have the most talent in the conference.
It does. It's a lot easier when you have that. Yep.
So Clemson squeaks by Syracuse. I could go on a tangent about this, but it looks like Clemson's going to get into the playoff, and I just simply don't think that they should be there. Given the talent in college football right now, there's so many good teams, and there's only 4 spots. And Clemson's probably going to get one of them, and they're going to get smoked.
It's certainly possible. because they're not playing well. Like they're squeaking by everybody right now. You know, they squeak by Wake, who was a well-coached football team, extremely well-coached. They squeak by Syracuse. They squeak
NC
by
State was close.
They squeak by Florida State.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I think Clemson's better than they were last year. But yes, if you put them out there against Alabama or Georgia, then they're going to get hammered, in my opinion.
Yep. Or Michigan.
Or Ohio State.
Yeah. TCU's really
I don't
good.
know. I'm kind of interested to see how Clemson, like, we haven't really, those have been Clemson's biggest tests all year. Like
No, and to their
be
credit,
fair,
they've passed them all.
they've passed the test.
They're the only team that's beat 3 ranked teams, I want to say,
Yeah.
in Wake, Syracuse, and NC State. So
Yeah.
they have that.
And to be fair, those are the 3 next best
Right.
teams
So
in the
it's like
ACC.
I don't think they're one of the
Or,
best
sorry,
4 teams when you consider all
3 of the top 5.
When
we
you
both have
cons-
Carolina at 4.
Like if you're going to do a top 25 and some team actually beats 3 top 25 teams, which is more than anybody else has done, then you have to give them credit for that,
Yeah.
right? So I don't
Absolutely.
think they're one of the best 4 teams. Like if the playoffs started tomorrow,
Well,
you
they
kinda
could,
have to
get a
put them in
4th
it.
if South Carolina's still ranked at the end of the
Right,
year.
that's
so
true.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very interested. I kind of agree with you guys. Like Clemson hasn't gone out and steamrolled people like they should have, but I don't know. I think
They had to bench their quarterback on Saturday too.
that is going to be very interesting.
And Dabo still says after the game that DJ's our guy. But how do you lose confidence in a situation like that where you get benched for a true freshman who then goes and wins the game for you?
But they only let him throw twice, 3
Yeah,
times,
it was
something
limited.
like that. Yeah.
So you guys have the same 1 through 7. So next at 4, you've got the Heels leading the way for the Coastal. If the season ended right now, it'd be Clemson and UNC in the ACC championship game, and that's a game to watch too for Clemson. Obviously, UNC has a really great offense. The Clemson South Carolina game is in Death Valley, so I would pick them to win since they haven't lost there in 4 years. But that could be a spot to trip up as well. Both of you have NC State at 5, and then you've got the Noles and Duke rounding it out at 7.
That's Duke back in the top half.
Back-to-back weeks, we've had the same.
And here's
top
the
7.
thing, like NC
No,
State, for me, NC State's
It's
not
3 straight weeks we've had the same top 7.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, NC State's not going to stay number 5 by the end of the season without Devin Leary.
No. Yeah, but NC State had a bye. So
Correct. You can't move them down until they lose. So hopefully we get to move them down next week.
well, I moved UVA down last week.
Did you?
After
I moved
they had
UVA
played, yeah.
down when they were or I don't know. Yeah, it is what it is.
You can do that to them, though. That's okay.
So the second half is where it's a little bit shifted around. Chris, you've got Louisville at 8. David has Miami at 8. Louisville played a pretty, I don't know how to classify that game against Pitt, honestly, because it was 7-7 in the fourth quarter. It was a terrible game.
Oh, it was a horrible game.
And then they kind of picked up steam in the fourth
that's
quarter.
the thing, man.
Well, they won a football game. So
They're almost every single ACC football game this year has just been like bad football, except for the ones that Clemson's been in.
Yeah.
Like when you just like take like 1,000-foot perspective, like that Virginia Georgia Tech game was horrible.
it was a horrible game.
Yeah.
I ended up with Louisville 8th because, do they have a winning record at this point? Are they
No,
4-3?
I
Or are
think
they
they're
4-4? Okay. I put them up there because, I had to put them ahead of Pitt for me because they just beat Pitt, and it's and they've got the same record, I believe, or similar record, and it's a what have you done for me lately? So that's why I had them 8th and Pitt 9th. Miami is just. When you lose, you have 8 turnovers in a game. How do you have 8 turnovers in a game?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a Duke team that this is a Duke team that went 0-8 in the ACC last year and lost their 8 ACC games by like an average of 30 points. They were one of the worst teams in ACC history last season. And I know they're a good football team this year, but Miami beat them by like 30 or 40 points last year, and this year they got smoked by them. So Miami spent all that money on coaches and probably spent some good money on NIL and the transfer portal too. And it's the same old Miami.
I do think it's telling though, because like I did not watch the game, and not because it was on RSN. I just didn't feel like watching.
I would have had to go to a bar to watch it. It wasn't available at my house.
Yeah, but it's very interesting how Miami forces 8 turnovers or Duke forces 8 in quotations 8 turnovers against Duke. Virginia Tech,
we hadn't forced 8 all year.
Yeah, and Virginia Tech didn't force any against Miami when they played in Lane Stadium. So, I guess Duke's defense is
Maybe we're saving it for NC State
good.
and Georgia Tech, hopefully.
Let's hope. So you both have UVA at 11. They get a bump from both of you, even after that god-awful performance in Atlanta this past
They
week.
got a bump because it's so much what have you done for me lately, and they won a football game. And the three teams I have below them, I've got Georgia Tech below them because Georgia Tech lost to them.
Right.
And then I've got Tech below them because we have fewer overall wins and we didn't
Yeah,
play.
that's
And then
what I did.
I've
I
got
dropped
BC
Georgia-
dead last because it's BC.
I just dropped Georgia Tech below them.
right.
So you both rounded out with BC at 14, and then Virginia Tech 12th for David and 13th for Chris.
God.
If you would have showed me, these lists at the beginning of the year, I would have been shocked.
I would have
Miami
guessed-
being
I think the
that
biggest
low
thing
and
would have been like
Syracuse
Duke
being
at
that low.
7. I would.
Yes.
I don't think it would have surprised. I don't think
None of this.
I don't think any of, like, the
Syracuse
top
at 3,
10
Syracuse at 3 surprises me too. Those are,
Yeah, but I don't think
Right.
it surprised me more than Duke at 7.
Yeah, I mean, I would have picked Duke
Considering
last.
Duke was probably like the worst team in the conference last year, and Duke.
Oh, well, they definitely were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really hope that Mike Elko wins ACC Coach of the Year. I mean, how can you not after
Yeah.
the turnaround that they've had?
We'll
It's
see how
impressive.
they finish. It's going to depend on, like, right now. I think they would give it to excuse me, can't talk. Dino Babers is who they would
Yeah,
give it to.
he
right
makes
now.
a good case as
Yeah,
well.
Yeah.
it'd be one of those two.
You know, this is. Everybody always says don't like the. Around the vibe around the reporters every ACC media days, don't pick Miami to win the Coastal Division
Yeah.
because it's never going to happen because
Please
Miami
don't.
always does something Miami.
Yeah.
Well, we see where Miami is right now. We both have Miami. You have Miami 10th. I have Miami 8th.
I just think Miami's got a good coaching staff now. They've got proven coordinators, proven position coaches. I don't think any of their past coaches have been bad at all.
No, it's just Miami.
I just think that's where decent to good coaches go to ruin their careers these days. Except
been a
now,
coaching
they're paying
experiment.
them a lot more money, so then when they have to fire them, it's going to be a bigger buyout. It's the only difference.
Yeah, I don't even want to get into how Texas A&M fans are feeling right now. I know that's SEC, but you talk about paying a coach a lot of money to not do what you're asking
And
for.
then have 3 players suspended for smoking up in the locker room right before the game on Saturday.
Yeah.
Clearly everyone's mind is in the right place in College Station right now.
Yikes. I don't want to go on, Tex Ags and see their message boards right now because it's a dumpster fire. I know the podcast is running a little bit late, but Jake, is there any questions that we should get to?
We have no questions in there today. I'll do a little bonus stat time with Scott Glessner. He says that NC State has outscored their opponents 126 to 57 in the first half, only 65 to 61 in the second half. So NC State likes to get off to hot starts. Tech may have to slow them down a little bit early on if they want to stay in the game.
Probably helped them when they had Leary.
Yeah. Thing is, I just can't see NC State under Jack Chambers just coming out to a smoking hot start and getting up like 14-0 or something like that.
Well, now that Virginia Tech, assuming Virginia Tech plays the proper personnel defensively.
Which I think they will this week. I mean, they got Delane in the starting lineup.
No,
now.
I'm just saying
That's good enough for
if
me.
If you roll out, like we obviously saw what happened to Virginia Tech defensively on that first series,
Right.
And
I think they've got that settled now. I think they'll be okay now. I think they know who their starters should be at every position now on the defensive side of the ball. I think they arguably should have known it 1 week earlier as far as Delane versus Breon Murray at one of the cornerback spots, but I think they know now.
well, the fact that Delane came in on like the second or third series is telling.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Jake. Game previews posted on techsideline.com as of today. Make sure you check that out and vote in the score poll. More preseason basketball content coming out this week. Is that something to look for?
We were talking about that this morning, and we'll probably both do something next week.
Yeah, I think Chris is going to have a column. I'm going to have kind of like I did it last year, and it turned out pretty well. Kind of 2 days, one day, one half the ACC, the other day, the other half of the ACC, and just kind of previewing, writing a little snippet on all the other teams that Tech's going to face this year, and I think he's going to have a column on the non-conference.
Yeah, and where the potential quad 1 wins come from on the non-conference schedule.
Yeah.
And, if there are any.
So that'll be next week since
Okay.
it's a short week.
Right.
But
Well, crossover season is upon us. I
It
guess
is.
the Georgia Tech recap will also be maybe Georgia Tech recap first half, second half will be basketball preview because they play the next day.
That's right. Or is it that night?
it would be
that
that
night.
night.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be that Monday, and there's a doubleheader. That's women at 5, men at 9. So
Is it 9? Yeah, I guess.
it is
oh
at
my
9,
God.
which is very
Get
very-
ready for those 9 p.m. men's basketball
Too old
games
for
that
that
we
mess.
all love. Well, that was another great episode of the Tech Sideline podcast. I want to thank everybody on set today. Will Stewart, founder and general manager of Tech Sideline. He's at Will Stewart TSL on Twitter, obviously not on set anymore. Chris Coleman, lead analyst and columnist for Tech Sideline. He is at Chris Coleman TSL on Twitter. David Cunningham popped on here super quick in the second half. He's at The Real D Cunna on Twitter. Jake Lyman in the fourth chair. A great last fourth chair appearance. Enjoyed his contributions, and Jack Bresendine producing. Thank you, Jack. The Hokies take the field for Game 8 against NC State at 7:30 p.m. inside Carter Finley Stadium on Thursday night. It'll be a great night for some football, 60 degrees at kickoff, and I hope to see a lot of Hokies there. If not, it'll be televised by ESPN, and we'll be back Monday to break it all down. I'm Katie Adams signing off from all of us here at Tech Sideline. Enjoy the game, Hokies fans, and enjoy your weekend.